Hi, and welcome to a webinar on Python lessons 5 through 8. Um, there is an optional lesson number 9. It's not required. It's more if you're interested in some advanced topics. You're more than welcome to check that section out. I'm happy to help you with it, but it won't be covered in the webinar specifically. Definitely ask questions if you have them, though. You don't need it for your project. Again, like I said, it's just if you want some advanced topics because you want to work on something else that's kind of neat. Today we're covering 4 different things, but I gotta let you know it's kind of the most important part for the project. So it's a really good idea that you go through the material, and I'm going to highlight some things that are particularly useful for your project as well. So the topics that we're going to cover are functions, which are probably the most useful thing in Python that you learn in this course. We're also going to talk about scripting, especially asking for user input. That's going to be absolutely essential in your project. We're also going to talk about loading in packages called NumPy and pandas. I'll talk about how those are useful, especially in further explorations. And I'll talk briefly about how I use them in the project, but we'll have a separate webinar just on the project. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Today, I'm going to do a couple of examples, and and we'll work through them. So I'll share my screen. All right, so let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay. All right, so we're going to be working with just this array to start with. When you're working in the first functions area, some of the main topics that they cover are how to write a function, basically the syntax for that, and the components of defining a function. And then the second thing they talk about is how to use a lambda function. And both of these are effective and both of these are useful. There's just certain needs for one or the other. A lot of times it's the best policy just to define a function, call it a name, say what passes into it, write some code, and then you can refer to that function anytime you want to use it. Think about like if you want to use like an average or a weighted average and you're going to plug in a bunch of different numbers into it. I like to think about like a grade book. If you have like certain assignments that are worth 20% and certain assignments that are worth 50%, it's nice to just kind of have a function where you can put scores into it. A lambda function is used kind of if it's a short and sweet function, a short and sweet arithmetic maybe, and you're only going to use it once. It's just a quicker way to do it. It takes up less space in your code. And if you never need to use it again, it's just kind of nice to put it in there and never have to refer to it again. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine 2 examples here. We have a list of numbers. And what we want to do is create a list of averages. Okay, so the first way we can do this is we can define a function. So to define a function, you put a def, which lets us know we're defining a function. Since we want the mean or the average, let's maybe call it mean, but we could just as easily call it average. And let's do the mean of, I think they use numList. Okay, so the list of numbers. All right, so keep in mind though, we have 5 lists of numbers. So this is a list of numbers that I want the average. This is a second list of numbers that I want the average, third and fourth. Okay, so our output should be 4 numbers. That is the average of each of those lists. Okay, this word right here is the name of my function. And what's in the parentheses are what passes into the function. You can think of it like a variable. You could call this X, you could call this Y, you can call this anything you want. But of course, with scripting, with Python, we want to be descriptive. So the thing that we are going to pass into our function is a number list. Okay. Next, we need the colon here. This means that whatever follows and is indented is part of our function. So when we pass in this number list into the function mean, what we want it to do is return the average. So we are going to return the sum of the number list, num list, okay? So we're gonna add them all up, and then we're gonna divide it by the length of that number list, okay? And maybe this looks a little cluttered. Maybe you want to put some spaces here, kind of whatever makes sense to you. But what we wanted to do is pass the number list into the mean function, and we wanted to return the sum of that number list over the length or the number of items in that list. Okay? Well, if we were to run it right now, okay, well, we don't have any output. We've done something because we've defined a mean, we've defined a function, but we haven't called that function to do anything. We've just defined it, okay? So if we actually want it to return something, if we actually want it to print something, okay, well, we would need to tell the program to print something, okay? So let's try if we did mean numbers. Let's see what happens if we do this. Okay, well, it doesn't like that. What we're trying to do is do stuff that works as integers and do stuff that works as lists, okay? What we really want to do is we want to take each of these lists, okay? And for each of the numbers in the list, we want to apply that into the mean function, okay? So we need some way to kind of take the list or take the integers that are in the list and then print that out or put each of those numbers from the list into this function and return our list back out. Right now, what we're doing is we're taking an array and trying to find the mean of that array, and that's not going to work for us. What we really need here is we need it to do the list of numbers. All right, so I think the example or the solution that they give is they call it averages, and they're going to create a new list using a map function. So I'm going to type this out real quick. What we want to do is we want to map the function to each of the lists and numbers. Now, map is a super, super useful function or function to use. What it does is it takes the function that we're using and we're going to iterate over numbers. Oh, that's nice. It highlights it for you. That's kind of cool. So what map does is it says, take the elements in numbers, run it through mean, and then we're going to create a list of them. Okay? So map is actually really useful, and there's documentation on it right here. Okay? There's documentation on it. I recommend reading that. I believe they give it to you in a different section. Okay? But anyway, so let's print these averages, and then we'll see maybe why our next one didn't go so well. Okay? So what we expect to get out is a list of the averages. And notice that there are 4 numbers here, okay? Because there are 4 lists here that we've taken the average of. Okay, so let's talk about what happened, okay? Let's put a print statement in here. Maybe we can do this. Oh, we need to define a variable there. Maybe let's not do that. Maybe let's try, let's change this up again. Let's try it. I'm not sure what'll happen. It's kind of the fun of it. Let's call this X, just a placeholder for now, because I want to see what happens when we print X. Okay. Let's take out this return. Let's see what happens if instead we print mean numbers. I just want to see what happens. This might be bad syntax. We'll find out. There's definitely a part in here where it doesn't like, oh yeah. So we're running into the same error about finding the mean of an array. If we take this part out, I just want to show you this. We actually get the averages that we got before. Sorry, the thing I was talking about with the error messages, I'm one of those people that I like to just type code in and see what happens and then look at the error message, and I feel like that's how I learn more. If you're not like that, that's totally fine. Just know that that's something I like to do. I don't know what's gonna happen. The errors definitely help me. And they talk about reading errors and how to use errors to help you. Is that in this one? It might be in the next one. But it's a super useful skill to have because it allows you to kind of learn at your own pace. And also, you're definitely going to run into errors along the way. So it's a good idea to kind of be able to read them and know what they mean. So let's take a look at this. All I did was add a print statement here. Okay, so what I did is I defined this just sit-in variable, which is basically the average of each number list. And then as we run the mean, it's going to print out whatever the mean is, okay? Which is really interesting. So here it's not a list, it's just different print statements. What we did by making averages a list of numbers plugged into mean, the function mean, iterating over numbers, okay? What we did is we created a new list so that when we printed averages, okay, and let's go back to what we had, which was return. Okay, when we printed averages, notice here we have just one after the other. But when we printed averages, it gave us a list of those averages that we could then use somewhere else as a list, like further in our code. Okay, so I like to play around with things like this. Functions are really fun. Remember that return doesn't actually doesn't output anything. You need it to print if you want it to output something. So just kind of keep that in mind. And map, again, is a pretty cool feature to use. Okay, so defining a function mean, saying what variable passes into it, okay? And then this colon, very, very important. And anything that's indented will be part of the function. So as soon as you leave the indentation, you're out of the function. Okay. Well, the next part of this would be to use a lambda function. Okay. So a lambda function here, instead of this function mean that we've defined, we want to replace this with something short and sweet. Maybe we're only going to take the mean once and then we'll be good to go. So I want to take this whole defined function and I want to fit it right here, okay? So for this, instead of having to define mean as a function, I am just going to define lambda. I have to say it that way every time, you guys. I'm sorry. All right, so lambda x, okay? Again, this colon means I'm defining a lambda function for a variable x. And here you don't have to be as descriptive because you're not going to use it again. X is just kind of a dummy variable. So a function that takes in some kind of input x, okay? And what we're going to do to that x is we're going to sum it and then divide it by the length of x, whatever it is. So notice x is here, here, and here. Num list is here, here, and here. Okay, so we're replacing num list with just x. Again, less descriptive because if you're using a lambda function, you're probably only using it once. Okay, so lambda says we're defining a lambda function such that x, the thing that we are passing into our function, we're going to sum that thing and divide it by the length of that thing. And since we're using map, here is our function and here is our iterable, the thing that we are going to iterate through the function. Okay, so if we take out this, so we're just going to comment this out, okay? If we test run it, we got the same exact thing because what we've done is we've replaced this lambda function, or we've replaced this function, defined function, with a lambda function. Again, short and sweet, all in one line, really nice trick to have up your sleeve, especially if it's a short thing like this. No real need to define a whole function for it. I will let you know for your project, you are going to be defining many functions. So get familiar with this process. This lambda function process is just kind of a short and sweet thing if you only need it once or twice. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Move on to scripting. Okay. When I took scripting, like I took this course, but when I took it, I thought this was a pretty tough section. It goes pretty quick. Okay, so here you install Python. Okay, you get your environment set up. I worked through Atom and my command line. I didn't do too much with Anaconda itself and working with that, but if you like it, that's fine. I also use Jupyter. So if you're familiar with Jupyter, I know I have a student or two that uses Spider. So any of these are fine. I haven't played around with Spider, but I did promise the student that I would try it out. So I will work on that. Ooh, I don't want to listen to this person. Okay, so what's really important here is the word input, okay? This is gonna be super, super important. You will use this on your project, for sure, because you wanna ask the user what they want to put in there, okay? So this is one of the more important things is this input function, okay? It basically prompts the user to do something, okay? Then you can do something with that, especially if you call it a variable like name, okay? You can also call it number, ask for a number, and then you can do something with that number, okay? So these are really nice examples to work through. Let's see, I forgot what this quiz was. Oh yeah, just kind of working through this again. Let's see. Here's what I was talking about with error messages. This is a great section to kind of work through how to deal with errors, how to deal with exceptions, focus more on the errors. I think that that's important. The exceptions could be useful for your project. You don't have to use them in there. There are ways around it if you cleverly define your functions. But if you want to work with exceptions a little bit, that's not a bad idea. Reading and writing files is going to be huge too for your project because you are going to need to load in data. But again, we'll talk about that with your project. All of this is just preparing you for what's coming. Okay, take notes on that if you want, but just know it's there for your reference in case you forget how to do it. Okay, standard library and local scripts. Okay, that's going to be useful for what's coming up when we deal with NumPy and pandas. But here they just kind of introduce it real quick. Not entirely sure why. Okay, talking about importing third-party libraries, all that is good stuff. Always, 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 if you don't know what a function does, just Google it. I swear that's what half of what technical people do in their job is just Google how to do things. Okay. I want to go over this practice question though. Okay. So what we're gonna do, and this particular example is awesome practice for your project. I love this one. It's a little tricky. I feel like it gets real hard real fast. But we're going to kind of walk through it. I'll explain a little bit more about the solution. What we're going to do is we're going to prompt the user. So we're going to use input, prompt the user for their name, and then we're going to tell them what their unique flower name is. Okay, thrilling stuff, I know. Okay, so in this little terminal down here, okay, this is if you decide to submit your project, one of the two ways, I think. This is what it will look like. You'll have your files over here. This is where you will write your code, and then you can open a terminal here. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to open a terminal. So this is our workspace. Okay. We're eventually going to need to run matchflowername.py. Okay. But let's write some code first. Okay, they tell you a couple hints. Your project will too if you haven't looked at it yet, but they'll tell you a couple hints of how to get started, which is really nice. So the first thing we want to do is create a dictionary from flowers.txt. Well, let's open that up and see what that looks like. Okay, so what we have is it looks like we just have strings here, okay, that tell you like, oh, C means coral bells and D means desert rose. This is not a dictionary itself. These are just strings. Okay, So what we want to do is we want to create a dictionary, because if we have a dictionary, if you remember, a dictionary had a key and a value, sometimes more than one value. Okay, so our key is something that we can call, and then our value can be returned because they go together. It's very, very nice. It's like looking something up in an actual dictionary. Okay, so we want to create a dictionary from this list. Okay, well, lots of ways to do this. Let's practice like they do in the solution, writing a function. Okay, so this function in particular is going to create a flower dictionary, which is why they called it create flower dictionary. Okay, all right. We are going to create a flower dictionary from flowers.txt. That was in the That's in the instructions. Okay, and it's also the name of our file. Okay, we're defining it, so we need a colon afterwards. All right, first thing we want to do when we start a dictionary is let's say that it's a dictionary. Okay, so let's start by an empty dictionary, and we're going to call that one flower dict. Okay. Now, what we want to do is we want to take each line. Notice that these are numbered, so they are lines. We're going to take each line. Okay, and then we want to do something to each line to create a dictionary. Well, anytime we are going through it, and you could argue that this could be a for loop, but really what we want to do is go until the end. You know, maybe we don't know, maybe there's double A, double B, I don't know. We're going to use a for loop in here to iterate through each line and do something to it. Okay, so let's see. They just rename. Oh, we got to open the file. So we are going to open flowers.txt. They call it F. That's totally fine. You can call it flower or whatever you want. Okay. So this is how you open the file, and now we're going to run our for loop. So for each line or item or whatever you want in F. Okay, so going through each line. Okay, we want to take the first part of it, the letter. We want that to be the key, because when the user inputs their first name, this is what we want to match to it, and this is what we want the value to return. So we want the key to be this first letter. So we want the letter. We want to pull that from it somehow. And then we want the name of the flower. So let's get two variables here. Let's get letter and let's get flower, because I know I'm going to need both. Equals. There you go. Okay. So how do we get these two separate from each other? Well, if you remember, you can split each of our things that we're running through. So each line we can split. Okay. And then we can take different parts of that split. So that's what they do in the solution. They're going to say for each line, we are going to split it. And where we are going to split it is at that colon. Okay. So notice we want it split right here. Okay. When you see that, I want this first part or this second part. Okay. So we're going to split it at that colon. Okay. Now the letter part is the 0th index. Okay, so we want index 0, the first part, basically. And they make it lower. You don't have to. The only reason it's good to make it lower, they do it like this. The only reason it's good to do that is because what if your user inputs a capital letter or a lowercase letter? You'd have to kind of accommodate for that. If you just make everything lowercase, sometimes it's a lot easier and you don't have to deal with people who use weird all capital letters or no capital letters or whatever. Okay, so that's why that's there. Just makes things lowercase. So we're going to take this first letter and make it lowercase. Okay, so we're splitting it, taking the 0th index and then making it lowercase. We're going to assign that to letter. Okay, all right. We're going to do the same thing with flower, except we are going to just take that second part, just take coral bells. We're going to take all of that and and strip it from the actual line itself. So let's do line.split, same split, but this time we want index number 1, that second part, okay? And then we're going to use the strip function to take away everything else that we don't need, okay? All right. Now to create the dictionary, we want to assign the key to a value. So in flower dict, okay, for each letter, we are going to assign the flower. So that's pulling from here and here, okay? So that means take the key, which is letter, and assign it equal to the flower that we just stripped from the line, okay? And then at the end of this, like for each line, at the end of this, okay, we want to return the dictionary, okay? So this is what we have so far. Okay, good. This is what we have so far. We've created a function called create a flower dictionary from this file. We started with an empty dictionary, okay? And we said open this as F, and then for each line in that file, we're gonna do these things to it. We're going to take the lowercase letter, strip the flower name from it, and then assign the flower to the letter and return the entire dictionary. Okay. All right. Okay. Flowers.txt. Why doesn't it like that? All right, honestly, no idea why it doesn't like that. I'm gonna continue. I have a backup plan in case that still doesn't work, but I'm gonna continue. That should work. Not sure why it doesn't. Flowers.txt. Maybe we'll just call it flowers. Okay, let's try that. Maybe it doesn't like the .txt. Okay, well, it liked that. Maybe it was the .txt it didn't like. Notice that nothing comes out because we haven't called this function to do anything. We've just defined it. We've just created it. So this is expected. The only thing that's nice about it is we didn't get an error. So we know that at least for now, we are error-free. Okay. If you wanted to test it, you could print flower dict, and it should actually, we could try it. Let's see, maybe we can just add it here. Let's see if this works. You know me, I just like to try things. I didn't like it. All right, not sure. We'll look in a second to see where to add that print statement. Okay, but let's move on to the second part. Here, we're gonna use input because we want to ask for the user's first and last name. To be honest, I don't know why we're asking for the last name because we're not gonna use it. So we might modify it just for our own sake to use the first name. Okay, so this is a function. Okay, so we are going to, they call it main, that's fine. So we're gonna define a function that is going to pull a name and then print from that name, print their unique flower. All right, let's define main. Since this is the thing that we actually want to have happen, you can call it main. You could also call it assign letter, assign flower, whatever makes sense to you. Don't forget that colon, super, super important. Okay, first thing we want to do, let's create, let's pull, so yeah, this is our file, sorry. That's why it's not doing anything. This doesn't matter what we call it because this is the thing that we input into it. Okay, that makes total sense. So this could be file, not fire, file. This could be file. This is the thing that we pass into our function. So it doesn't really matter what we call it. No wonder it didn't like .txt because it's not a thing. It's just a variable. Okay. So that goes here and here. Okay. What we want to do first is we actually want to pull in flowers.txt. So let's do, this is what they call it. You can call this whatever you want. Create flower dict. So this is the name of our function up here. And instead of file this time, we actually want to replace it with the file that we want to put in there. So this will be flowers. Flowers.txt. Okay, so this is the thing that we actually want to pull into this function that we just created. So that says take this file, put it in here, and then with this, open it as F, run through each line in that file, do all this to it. Okay, so that's what happened. And then when you return it, it will return as flower_d. Okay, all right, a little bit of a wraparound there, but try to stay with me here. All right, next thing we want, let's do, I don't know. I say we just do ask for your first name. So I'm just going to do first name. We'll see what happens. All right, here we're going to input. Here's where we want our user input. So let's say input, enter your first name. Okay. The one thing I'll say that I always forget, put a space here so it looks nicer. I always forget that, but you'll notice when you run it, it's like not as nice if you don't put a space there. Okay, so, actually let's call this just name. Because what we want to do to that name is we want to make sure that we only have the lowercase part. Again, let's just make that lowercase. So let's do first name equals name dot lower. Okay, so we'll make it lowercase. Again, that's to help us here match to the correct one. I'll show you what happens if we take that out. Okay. And then, so we don't just want the first name. We just want the first letter because that's the thing we're going to match. So let's do first letter. And then we're going to take first name and find the first index of it. So the first letter is the first index position of the first name. Okay. And then we want to print it out. Okay. So once we have the first letter, we want to call upon that dictionary to actually match it to the flower name. Okay. So we're going to print your, let's do that better. Your flower name is, and then we'll put it in here. Okay, dot format, flower D. So this is our dictionary here. Okay, and then we want to pull in the key first letter. Okay. So let's chat through that real quick. Let me make sure I have all my. I think I need one more here. So this one goes to this one, this one. Yeah, okay. So what we've done here is we are saying in our flower dictionary that we created using function create flower dictionary from our text file flowers.txt. From this dictionary, the key is the first letter, which is from your name, the first letter. It's going to find this first letter in the dictionary we created up here and return whatever the value is from that key. Okay, that's what should happen. Okay, now remember, all we've done is define this function. We actually want to run it. So let's do that. Let's run that function. Okay. All right, let's see what happens. Okay, notice it's prompting enter your first name because that is what the input statement does. Okay, so I'm going to put Jenny. That is my first name. Okay, so my flower name is Jamesia americana. Beautiful. Okay. All right. Now notice if I were to run it again and I enter lowercase, okay, I get the same response. Totally fine. Okay. It's matching my first letter J to the value of J. And if you didn't believe me, right, you could go to J. Here it is. We created that dictionary. Okay. Now let's take those lowers out. Okay. we'll just hashtag him. Let's take these lowers out. Okay. All right. It should still run fine. Okay. So I'll type in Jenny. It gives me Jamesia Americana. But what would happen, and I don't know if this will actually error, if I never type in. Notice what happened. I did a lowercase j, right? Because maybe I just forgot to shift, or maybe my shift key is broken, or maybe I'm lazy. Who knows, okay? When you're asking users for input, any of those could be a real answer, okay? But what's happening is a key error. It's saying this lowercase j is not in our dictionary. Because what we did to define our dictionary, up here, is we just split the first part off. Well, the first part is capital. It's a capital letter. Because it's a string, there are capital letters. So it said, okay, well, that's totally fine. I can take a capital letter. And remember, capital Jenny worked just fine. But lowercase Jenny did not, because this lowercase j did not exactly match the string. So what's really nice, and again, think about this when you're doing your project, if you force everything to be lowercase, so when you create the dictionary, force it to be lowercase, and especially when you ask for user input to make things lowercase, okay, then it doesn't matter if I type in lowercase or uppercase. It doesn't matter because, you know, it's going to convert it to lowercase anyway because I told it to just convert it to lowercase. Okay, so I'm not going to run into the same user errors. All right, so that's kind of the main thing I wanted to point out here, is to kind of walk through this example. It's okay if this example was extremely challenging for you, and it's great if it wasn't extremely challenging for you. I remember when I did this course and I went to this problem, I was like, whoa, what? So I just kind of wanted to walk through it with you and explain different elements of it. Again, play around with this. What would happen if I changed this number? What do you think would happen? What actually happens? What would happen if I kind of changed up my variable names here? What if I just made this first name and tried putting dot lower here, right? Like those are the kind of things I like to play around with. I feel like I learn a little bit more about the functions by doing that. It's fine if that is not your style. Thanks for putting up with me while I stumble through it. All right. The next two are on NumPy and pandas. And I'm going to be real with you. All of these are interesting and good to go through and take a breezing walk through the park with these. Try the quizzes, look at the solutions, all you need to do. But really, really, especially with NumPy, you don't need to use it on the project. I'm just going to be real with you. You can, absolutely you can, but you don't have to. Okay. NumPy is super, super handy when you are creating visuals. It does really cool things with like histograms and other kinds of data displays like box and whisker charts or yeah, I don't know. I made this really cool histogram with it one time. There's another like SNS, was it Seaborn, that also works really, really nicely with visualizations. Anyway, NumPy, it's very useful. I think that its uses are beyond the scope of this course, but if you take like the, I think it's a data analysis or a data analyst one, I forgot what it's called. I think they go into NumPy a little bit more. For this course, just a very, very easy understanding of this. That's really all you need. For pandas, okay, pandas and data frames, I would spend a little more time learning about, especially, where is it here? Let's see if this is the right one. Especially when you're asked to like load in. So definitely importing. This isn't quite it. Especially opening files. That's what I'm looking for. I know it's in here somewhere. I don't know. Maybe I'll talk more about it in the yeah, you don't need a ton of this. I'm going to be honest. Good to read, good to go through. But if you're like focused on just passing your project, not something you need to do. Maybe this is it. Yeah, this is it. Okay, this is the one you want to focus on. Okay, so with pandas, this is going to be huge. Okay, calling loading data into a data frame. You are going to use this for your project 100%. Okay, so you can call this whatever you want. A lot of times it's easy to call this DF for data frame, but you can be more descriptive. You can call it, Chicago DF or Google Stock DF or just Google Stock like they did here. But pandas.read CSV, that's huge, okay? Notice that this is in single quotes, okay? And it's .csv. I don't know what this is. You won't always need this notation, but put your file name in there, basically. This is how you're really gonna use pandas. And then there's like a couple other brief things that you can do with pandas, but this is the one you're for sure gonna use in your project, okay? I think pandas was more interesting for this particular project, but pandas and NumPy, go as much in depth with them as you want. Okay. All right. Let's see. What else do I want to talk about today? Okay. For this one, the advanced topics, I just want to do it really, really quickly here. Let's see. I gotta make sure I pause this so they don't stop talking over me. This is useful if you want to move on. If you want to move on into like data analysis, iterating through your range, that can be really useful. This is a very short section. So again, if you're a little bit behind, you might skip it and go back to it if you have time later. You do have access to this content after you graduated. You won't necessarily have the workspaces, but you'll definitely have access to all of this. So you can always read it later if you want, okay? But I just wanted to show you kind of what this looks like in case you haven't peeped it. Now you know. And then what's great is you are ready for your project, okay? Cool. So yeah, this is kind of what your project looks like. I have a whole different webinar where I'm gonna kind of talk through this, but with the conclusion of this webinar, you are well equipped to be on your way. So thank you for watching. I know that sometimes I get a little jumbly with my examples, but I think that that's a very realistic process. I hope I didn't confuse you too much, but if you do have any questions or if you have any further questions to ask me, or if you're working on your project and you go back and do an example and you're like, wait, I don't think I really understand this, feel free to reach out to me. I know I was traveling a lot last week. I promise it will all calm down now. So thank you for your patience. And I really look forward to seeing what kind of projects you have, helping you with them, and helping you find success in Python. It's what it's all about. So thank you, and I'll see you in like a couple minutes to talk about the project if you're still with me. So all right, see you later.